Neil Armstrong just reported back it's been a real smooth countdown. We passed the 50-second mark.
Welcome to Watch Mojo, and today we're counting down our picks for the 100 events that forcefully grabbed the world's attention and just wouldn't let go.
And as we Rwandans feared for our lives, the world looked on in horror.
Number 100, the sinking of the Kursk.
A shockwave bursts through the command center. The crew is slammed to the floor.
Russia's Navy was putting its prized nuclear sub, the Kursk, through its paces in the icy Barents Sea. Then came an explosion. A torpedo malfunctioned, triggering a chain reaction, ripping the vessel apart and sending it to the ocean floor. Most of the 118 crew members died instantly.
The final event that killed those sailors was a fire, an intense fire, caused by their chemical canisters that generated oxygen meeting an oily film on the water that was rising in that compartment.
A handful survived, trapped in the dark, scribbling frantic notes as oxygen ran out. Russia dragged its feet on rescue efforts and even turned down foreign help. The world was outraged. Russia allowed their nationalistic pride to outweigh the needs of their sailors. By the time the divers reached the wreck, all hope was gone. The disaster humiliated Moscow and horrified the world.
We wait. We wait. And the men at the bottom? They wait too.
Number 99, the ozone hole discovered.
Even if the hole remains confined to Antarctica, the region will be a test case of how ozone changes affect life. Many creatures live underwater, protected from ultraviolet rays.
It may be hard to imagine today. Everyone on Earth gets the same collective bad news about an impending disaster, and instead of debating it or sticking their heads in the sand, they believed in science and fixed the problem. It may sound like a pipe dream, but that is exactly what happened with the ozone layer.
Turned out that the reason we see an ozone hole over Antarctica is essentially because during the polar winter, temperatures fall below -78 Celsius, and under those conditions, nacreous clouds can form in the ozone layer.
In the mid-1980s, scientists studying the skies over Antarctica made a shocking discovery. Earth's protective ozone layer had a massive hole. Without it, humans faced soaring cancer risks. Worse, crops would wither and ecosystems could collapse. The culprit? Everyday chemicals like CFCs in spray cans and refrigerators. Governments scrambled, and within 2 years, the Montreal Protocol was signed, phasing out the worst offenders.
About 2 years after all that science got figured out, nearly 200 countries came together and signed something called the Montreal Protocol. It was a global policy, an agreement that said, hey, there's bad chemicals that hurt the ozone layer. Let's not use those anymore.
Number 98, the signing of the United Nations Charter.
This conference will devote its energies and its labors exclusively to the single problem of setting up the essential organization to keep the peace.
In June 1945, the world was still reeling from the carnage of World War II. Representatives from 50 nations gathered in San Francisco to try something bold, an international body dedicated to peace. Their ultimate goal was to prevent a third world war. On June 26th, they signed the United Nations Charter. For the first time, countries committed on paper to collective security, human rights, and international cooperation.
The UN Charter was the sum and substance of humanity crying out for some sort of world order. They created a charter which reflected the aspirations of humanity for peace.
The UN wasn't perfect, and it's faced criticism over the years, but in that moment, people dared to hope war might not be humanity's default state. It was an historic attempt to turn horror into a framework for peace.
8 decades on, the guiding document for world peace and security still relevant, but under threat.
We will succeed.
Number 97, the assassination of Anwar Sadat.
Israelis have long feared that the peace agreement with Egypt might be dependent on the life of one man. That man is now dead, and Israel will be very cautious in dealing with his successors.
On October 6, 1981, Egyptian President Anwar Sadat presided over a military parade in Cairo. The event marked the anniversary of Egypt's 1973 crossing of the Suez Canal. Sadly, what was meant to be a celebration became an ambush. The president had angered militants by signing a peace treaty with Israel 2 years earlier.
They don't want to fulfill the resolution of the Security Council because the first item in this resolution is the withdrawal. They will not agree to this.
It was the first such agreement between the Jewish state and an Arab nation. Unfortunately, soldiers aligned with Islamist extremists refused to accept it. They opened fire and hurled grenades at the reviewing stand. Sadat was fatally wounded, along with 10 others, while dozens more were injured. His assassination shocked the world and left Egypt reeling.
President Sadat is hit by 37 bullets, but it is a ricochet which delivers the fatal wound.
Number 96, the first human heart transplant.
Surrounded by a team of 40, it took Barnard 8.5 hours to complete the surgery. Dini Friedman, then in her 20s, was part of the team. She was one of the perfusionists on duty.
Around the same time Jimi Hendrix was releasing his second album, a South African surgeon was making history. At Groote Schuur Hospital in Cape Town, Christian Barnard successfully transplanted the heart from one person into another. The heart of a young woman killed in a car accident was placed into Louis Vashkansky, a 54-year-old man with severe heart disease. Sadly, Vashkansky survived only 18 days before succumbing to pneumonia. Still, the operation proved that what was once thought impossible was not. The news electrified the world. Newspapers splashed it across front pages, and Barnard became an overnight celebrity. The surgery opened the door to a new era in medicine, where replacing the very core of human life was no longer science fiction.
Letters written at the time show a mixed response to the surgery. One doctor in the former Yugoslavia describes it as the most important event in the history of the human spirit.
Number 95, the Paris Climate Agreement.
In international politics, this is a show of force. 175 countries, including big polluters like the United States and China, vowing to cut back emissions and stop global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels.
By the mid-2010s, climate change had gone from a scientific warning about the far-flung future to an active global emergency. Parts of the developing world were already suffering severe floods, droughts, and heat waves. In December 2015, nearly every nation gathered in Paris for a summit like no other. Countries pledged to cut greenhouse gas emissions and aim for, quote, well below 2 degrees Celsius. But here's the catch. The agreement has almost no teeth. Enforcement is voluntary, and it's vulnerable to political whims, misinformation, and outright denial. The U.S. first withdrew under Donald Trump, then rejoined under Joe Biden. When Trump won re-election, he withdrew again, showing just how fragile global climate resolve really is.
So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great.
Number 94, the Millennium Celebrations.
Perhaps the deadliest threat in the U.S. is power company failure. Everything stops in urban America if power fails, if the electricity goes off.
The 20th century ended with the world holding its collective breath as the clock ticked toward midnight. Would the Y2K bug crash computers, planes, and power grids? Or would it be the party of the century? As fireworks lit up Sydney, London, New York, and beyond, billions watched the sunrise on the new year.
3, 2, 1, happy 2000!
The new year was finally here, and the world seemed to still be intact, at least for the most part.
From Pope John Paul II's blessing in Rome to New Zealand's elaborate ceremonies, the festivities stretched across time zones in a rolling wave of celebration. The feared apocalypse never came. Instead, humanity shared one of its most synchronized and spectacular countdowns in history.
As the new year, as the new millennium has moved from New Zealand and across the Pacific and so on, we've been watching the internet. A number of AOL subscribers are overseas, and there have been absolutely no anomalies.
Number 93, the Boston Marathon bombing.
Very scary sight, probably one of the most scary incidences that I've ever been involved with.
The finish lines of major marathons are usually where runners from around the world celebrate their accomplishments. At the 2013 Boston Marathon, it became a scene of horror. On that chilly April morning, 2 bombs detonated in the crowd. 3 people were killed and hundreds more were wounded.
I watched from Hereford all the way down to the finish, and that's exactly the 2 areas where the bombs went off. So It was a surreal moment to think of. I was a little kid watching my dad run right there. I mean, that easily could have been me or my sister.
Spectators, as well as on-site medical personnel, became de facto first responders, tearing down barricades to save lives as smoke and panic filled the air. The manhunt that followed shut down the entire city of Boston, playing out live on screens worldwide. When it ended, one bomber was dead and the other was in custody. Boston grieved, but also united under a new rallying cry, Boston Strong. A race that had stood for endurance now symbolized resilience itself.
This is Delta 984. I'm headed to the second bomber site. Everybody keep this line clear.
Number 92, Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier, the fight of the century.
Muhammad Ali is scoring heavily, but he could get discouraged. He's hit this man with his Sunday punches.
Boxing had never seen anything like it. Muhammad Ali, brash and undefeated, faced Joe Frazier, the reigning heavyweight champion. Their clash at Madison Square Garden wasn't merely about boxing. The contest was a proxy for politics, race, and the Vietnam War in a divided America. What began as an American story became a global spectacle as the whole world tuned in.
Wicked punches by the ex-champion. But there's Muhammad Ali caught on the ropes again.
The fight was broadcast to 35 countries, drawing an estimated 300 million viewers worldwide. It was unheard of viewership at the time. For 15 rounds, the two men traded punishing blows, with Frazier knocking Ali down in the final round to seal his victory.
Hook's coming. Lean back, man. Move back, work legs.
It was brutal, historic, and truly lived up to its name, the fight of the century. Number 91, the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi.
In a radio broadcast, Nehru announced the news of Gandhi's death. The light has gone out of our lives, and there is darkness everywhere.
Mahatma Gandhi had achieved his lifelong dream of Indian independence. Only months later, the paragon of nonviolent resistance was struck down by one of his own people. As he walked to a prayer meeting in New Delhi greeting supporters, a Hindu nationalist named Nathuram Godse waited in the crowd. Godse was enraged by Gandhi's calls for peace between Hindus and Muslims after partition. He raised a pistol and fired 3 shots at point-blank range. Gandhi collapsed, reportedly uttering the words, "Hey Ram." The man who had embodied nonviolent resistance and inspired millions was silenced by violence. His death shocked India and the world, leaving a nation adrift after finally winning its freedom.
What do you want? That the fighting will stop, that you make me believe that it will never start again.
Number 90, the death of Pope John Paul II.
At 21:37, our beloved Holy Father John Paul II has returned to his home.
For more than 25 years, Pope John Paul II had been a towering figure in global religion and politics. His papacy helped inspire resistance to communism. His charisma and travels across the world made him one of the most recognized leaders on earth. When he died in Vatican City after a long illness, the world seemed to pause.
I think, like many millions of people around the world, Brian, I'm feeling a little orphaned right now. And yet, in the midst of that sorrow, there's a profound sense of the rightness of the timing of this.
Millions of mourners flooded Rome, while over 2 billion people watched his funeral broadcast worldwide. It was one of the largest gatherings of grief in modern history. The loss of a pope is always historic, but John Paul's passing felt like the end of an era.
I believe that he left the church and the world his love. How else can you explain that even after his death, all the people came to be with him?
Number 89, Roe v. Wade overturned.
States like Arkansas can now revive their pre-Roe bans through official enforcement or by filing court actions. However, not all states with pre-Roe bans are poised to enforce the laws.
For nearly 50 years, Roe v. Wade guaranteed a constitutional right to abortion in the United States. That all changed with the Supreme Court's ruling in Dobbs v. Jackson Women's Health Organization. The court overturned Roe, declaring that abortion access would now be decided by individual states. In an instant, reproductive rights became a matter of geography.
I'm already a mother, so I know it's really hard. Financially, I'm not where I want to be, and I don't think I'll be able to take care of another child, so I wouldn't want to bring a child into this world that I couldn't take care of.
Some states banned the procedure outright the moment the decision was made. Others made legislative moves to protect it. The decision set off protests across America and stunned observers abroad. World leaders and human rights groups condemned the rollback, warning it threatened to inspire similar challenges elsewhere. A ruling meant for one nation was potentially the first ripple in a worldwide rollback of women's reproductive freedom.
Make no mistake, this decision is a culmination of a deliberate effort over decades to upset the balance of our law.
Number 88, the Arab Spring.
We've never felt such sense of belonging to a group, a huge mass of strangers. This is something that is very alien to Egyptians, especially Egyptian women.
It began with a street vendor in Tunisia setting himself on fire in protest of corruption and police harassment. That one act was the first pebble triggering a regional avalanche. Millions followed, taking to the streets in mass protests. They demanded democracy, jobs, and basic dignity. Governments fell in Tunisia, Egypt, Libya, and Yemen, while protests shook nations from Syria to Bahrain.
Well, this is a constantly changing front line of the search. You're going to hear the huge amount of fighting taking place just a few meters in front of us.
Social media played a pivotal role, turning local resistance into global news in real time. For a brief moment, it looked like an unstoppable wave of freedom. The aftermath, though, was uneven. Some countries slid into civil war, others into repression. The Arab Spring inspired hope for millions, but left a legacy of reforms, fear, and upheaval across the Middle East.
All the people smuggling, all the deaths, all the suffering that's still going on now, it all stems from what happened in the Arab Spring.
Number 87, the Las Vegas mass shooting.
Sound system, and I hit Brian on the arm. I'm like, I think the PA just went out.
I thought maybe he was going to have fireworks part of his show, and maybe they didn't go off right.
Firecrackers.
That sounds like a firecracker. Who the hell would have a firecracker here?
Concert goers at the Route 91 Harvest Festival thought they were enjoying a night of country music. Instead, they became victims of the deadliest mass shooting in modern U.S. history. In the middle of the concert, a gunman opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel. He sprayed thousands of bullets into the crowd below. Nearly 60 people were killed, and more than 850 others were injured before the rampage ended.
For days, the festival grounds remain frozen in those moments of terror.
The chaos was captured on countless cell phones, spreading horror across the world in real time. The massacre reignited debates over gun laws, mental health, and safety in public spaces. Abroad, it reinforced grim perceptions of America's gun violence epidemic. Many were left to wonder why nothing ever changes in America.
There is a chasm in American politics over the right to bear arms. This argument is intensely ideological and blocks any rational discussion of policy.
Number 86, the assassination of Indira Gandhi.
Humankind is balancing on the brink of the collapse of the world economic system and annihilation through nuclear war.
Indira Gandhi was India's first and only female prime minister. She was already a dominant figure in the country's politics decades before her election. After ordering a controversial military raid on Sikh militants in Amritsar, though, she became a marked woman. Later that year, 2 of her own Sikh bodyguards turned their weapons on her at her residence in New Delhi. Gandhi was killed instantly, and anti-Sikh riots erupted across India in the aftermath. Thousands were killed in sectarian violence. The impact of her assassination echoed across the region for years. Comparisons were drawn later when Pakistan's first female prime minister, Benazir Bhutto, was also gunned down. 2 of South Asia's most powerful women met the same tragic fate decades apart.
There have been at least 8 bullets removed from her body, according to a number of different sources, primarily abdominal, some reports also of chest injuries and thigh injuries.
Number 85, the Beijing Olympics. The 2008 Summer Olympics in Beijing were unlike anything the Games had seen before. China spent an astounding $40 billion in hopes of achieving the greatest spectacle in the history of sports. Its capital was transformed into a massive stage for national pride. It was also a launchpad for China's global ambitions. The opening ceremony, directed by filmmaker Zhang Yimou, dazzled billions with its sheer scale, precision, and artistry. For 17 days, the world watched as Beijing delivered gold medal drama like Michael Phelps's record-breaking 8 wins and Usain Bolt's shattering sprint records. China topped the gold medal count for the first time ever. Beyond sports, the Games announced China's arrival as a modern superpower, projecting strength and cultural influence. Number 84, the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin.
The Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin, the architect of the Middle East peace process, has been assassinated.
The assassin, a right-wing Israeli Jew, Yigal Amir.
It's not an exaggeration to say that the Oslo Accords were one of the most unlikely peace deals in human history. Signed in the early 1990s, they brought Israelis and Palestinians closer to reconciliation than anyone thought possible. But that fragile hope was destroyed with a single bullet. At a peace rally in Tel Aviv, a right-wing extremist furious at Rabin's concessions assassinated the Israeli prime minister.
All Likud leaders, especially Benjamin Netanyahu, they have used very strong language against Prime Minister Rabin.
Rabin's death shocked the world and shattered any momentum toward peace. The aftermath saw mistrust harden. Violence soon returned, and opportunities for peace disappeared utterly. Decades later, Gaza remains a flashpoint of suffering. It is impossible not to wonder how many lives might have been saved if Rabin had lived to finish what he started.
The police hustled the assassin away. Later he told them that his orders came from God and that he had no regrets, because Mr. Rabin's pursuit of peace made him a traitor to his people.
Number 83, the fall of the Soviet Union.
Boris Yeltsin will find those words most gratifying. He said today that the people here needed hope. They needed to believe in something.
The USSR was once the world's eastern superpower, locked in a Cold War standoff with the United States. By the early 1990s, economic collapse, nationalist movements, and political reform had pushed it to the breaking point. In December 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned as president. The Soviet flag was lowered from the Kremlin and the Union ceased to exist.
We entered Red Square, 300 people, who had come to speak out against this astonishing decision. And there were 287 million people in the USSR. I always say, for 1 million citizens, only a single person showed up to protect the Soviet Union.
15 independent nations emerged overnight. The Cold War was suddenly over, not with nuclear fire, but with a quiet unraveling. For billions watching, it felt like history had shifted in real time. The fall of the Soviet Union redrew the global map, leaving the United States the world's lone superpower for a time.
What we heard over and over today from colleagues Gennady and Ivan, from soldiers Kostya and Pasha, from close friends Valery and Luda, was that Gorbachev had done them some good a long time ago.
Number 82, the polio vaccine.
Jonas Salk and his team spent 6 years working on a vaccine, conducting a huge nationwide trial on 1.8 million children.
Polio was once among the most feared diseases in the world. It was a society-wide nightmare. Outbreaks would leave thousands of children with paralysis every year. Parents across the planet were often terrified their town could be next. That fear vanished like a puff of smoke. In 1955, Jonas Salk's breakthrough polio vaccine was declared safe and effective.
Dr. Salk's laboratory was like a factory in that he had a large number of people. They were all doing what he dictated they do.
Church bells literally rang and people wept in the streets. Salk was hailed as perhaps the first truly global hero for refusing to patent his discovery. Within a few years, mass vaccination drives slashed polio cases, first across the United States and then the world. The vaccine transformed public health, proving science could conquer even the most terrifying epidemics. For millions, it was nothing short of a miracle.
Americans continued to vaccinate their children. They had waited years for the polio vaccine. They were not about to wait any longer.
Number 81, George Floyd's murder and global protests.
It's Monday evening in Minneapolis. 4 police officers have responded to a call alleging a man has used a counterfeit $20 bill to buy a packet of cigarettes.
The killing of George Floyd under the knee of a Minneapolis police officer was captured on video. The footage spread almost instantly around the world. Millions witnessed Floyd gasping, "I can't breathe," as bystanders pleaded for his life. His death ignited the largest wave of protests in American history. Millions demanded racial justice and police reform. But the outrage didn't stop at America's borders.
The state deployed the National Guard to restore order, and local officials moved unusually quickly to charge the police officer with third-degree murder and manslaughter.
Demonstrations erupted in more than 60 countries. From London to Sydney to Nairobi, Floyd's story became a symbol of global struggles against racism and abuse of power. For a moment, the world seemed united in anger, grief, and a call for change.
Protesters today marched through the streets of San Francisco, coming here to City Hall for a peaceful rally. Authorities hope to avoid a repeat of what happened last night in Oakland, a night punctuated by fires and tear gas, with 60 people detained for looting and 13 officers injured.
Number 80, the Apollo 13 rescue.
Houston, what do we do if we rip the bag? Can we tape it?
They just tore the bag. Stand by.
What you tell them to do? Well, they should have one more bag left.
What was meant to be NASA's third mission to the moon became a desperate fight for survival. 2 days after launch, an oxygen tank exploded on Apollo 13. The blast completely disabled the spacecraft, forcing the crew to radio the now immortal words,
"Houston, we have a problem."
With dwindling power and rising carbon dioxide, astronauts Jim Lovell, Jack Swigert, and Fred Hayes were left stranded in space.
Okay, let's make sure that we don't do anything that will cause us to lose fuel cell number 2.
On the stricken spacecraft, energy is in short supply.
The world held its breath as NASA engineers worked the problem. They improvised life-saving fixes with duct tape, manuals, and sheer ingenuity. Against incredible odds, the crew eventually returned, splashing down safely in the Pacific. The successful failure became one of humanity's most dramatic rescues, watched live across the globe.
I recall, Captain, that when I spoke to you on the phone, you said that you regretted that you were unable to complete your mission. I hereby declare that this was a successful mission.
Number 79, the discovery of penicillin.
A 52-year-old man has made a miraculous recovery from meningitis with the aid of a new wonder drug developed by the eminent Professor Alexander Fleming.
Medicine changed forever, all thanks to a messy lab bench. While studying staphylococci in 1928, Alexander Fleming noticed that mold growing on one of his petri dishes was killing the surrounding bacteria. That mold, Penicillium notatum, became the world's first true antibiotic. Fleming published his findings the following year.
Tell us how you discovered penicillin, Professor Fleming.
Well, it was an accident, really. I left a culture plate of Staphylococcus in my lab over the summer break, and I was about to throw it out when I noticed that mold had grown on the culture plate.
It took more than a decade before others developed penicillin into a usable drug. By World War II, it was saving soldiers' lives on a massive scale. Once lethal infections became treatable conditions, the discovery ushered in the antibiotic era and extended human life expectancy. It's no exaggeration to say millions, if not billions, have lived because of a lucky accident.
I certainly didn't plan to revolutionize all medicine, Fleming later said, but I guess that's exactly what I did.
Number 78, the election of Donald Trump.
The big networks just called this for Donald Trump. Hugs, kisses, chants.
Brexit was a tremor warning of a coming earthquake. Just months after the UK stunned the world by voting to leave the European Union, America delivered its own shock. Donald Trump, a celebrity businessman with no political experience, defeated Hillary Clinton to become president of the United States. His victory defied polls, pundits, political tradition. It even surprised many in his own camp.
I've just received a call from Secretary Clinton. She congratulated us, it's about us, on our victory.
Trump rode a wave of populist rage at elites, globalization, and immigration. It marked a turning point in Western politics, an anti-establishment roar too loud to ignore. For allies and adversaries alike, Trump's rise signaled uncertainty and retreat. For some, it was a model to emulate. Either way, his election and later return marked a transformation that unsettled much of the world.
So when we have an animal do an attack like he did the other day on the west side of Manhattan. We are hitting them 10 times harder.
Number 77, Live Aid. In the summer of 1985, music tried to save the world. Organized by Bob Geldof and Midge Ure, Live Aid was a transatlantic charity concert staged in London and Philadelphia to raise money for famine relief in Ethiopia. It was one of the most ambitious broadcasts in history. The audience was estimated to be nearly 1.9 billion people, almost 40% of the world's population at the time. The lineup was a who's who of rock royalty. Queen, U2, David Bowie, Elton John, and dozens more. Queen's set in particular has gone down as one of the greatest live performances ever. By the end, the concert raised over $125 million. More importantly, it showed how music and mass media could temporarily unite the planet. Number 76, the Great Recession.
But wait, you are the bank. When you work for the bank, I bet your margins are pretty nice and fat.
Let's not talk about my margins, by the way. Being nice and fat, that's a nice shirt. Do they make it for men?
4 years, deregulation let banks take bigger and riskier bets. Oversight weakened, and fewer regulators scrutinized their tricky or outright illegal dealings. The bubble finally burst in 2008. What began with bad mortgages in the United States snowballed into the worst global financial collapse since the Great Depression. Housing values evaporated, stock markets cratered, and Lehman Brothers went under in a single weekend.
People getting run out of their homes, payrolls couldn't be met. And I just could envision what a Great Depression would mean. If it's bad now, imagine how bad it would really get.
Millions lost their jobs, homes, and savings. Unemployment applications and home foreclosures skyrocketed. Governments raced to bail out banks and pump trillions into the economy just to keep it standing. The shockwaves hit Europe, Asia, and beyond, fueling political upheaval that lingers today. The Great Recession proved the global economy could be shaken to its core by the greed of a few.
Valukas' team spent a year and a half interviewing hundreds of former employees and poring over 34 million documents. They told of how Lehman bought up huge amounts of real estate that it couldn't unload when the market went south.
Number 75, the Waco siege.
I just see black dots running toward us. I had no idea what it was.
If they got a target, give us a target.
What began as a simple FBI raid turned into a 51-day standoff, capped by a massacre broadcast around the world. In 1993, federal agents surrounded a Texas compound occupied by the Branch Davidians. The heavily armed cult was led by self-proclaimed prophet David Koresh. What followed was a tense, chaotic siege marked by gunfire, negotiation failures, and round-the-clock media coverage. It ended in tragedy when a fire engulfed the compound during a final assault.
People are frantic. Some people have taken their gas masks off.
When the smoke cleared, 76 people were dead, including children. The images were harrowing, the aftermath incendiary. Waco left scars for decades. It sparked a wave of anti-government rage and far-right extremism that still echoes in America today.
For the children's sake, you might have to bear a gun one day.
Number 74, the Iranian embassy siege.
After a second explosion, smoke obscured the front of the embassy again. And then there was gunfire. It seemed to come from all around the building.
For 6 days in 1980, the world held its breath. Armed men stormed the Iranian embassy in London, taking 26 employees hostage. They demanded independence for the Iranian province of Khuzestan. An English crisis quickly escalated into an international incident.
The guy who was doing 3IC of the team came into the killing house and he said, "Hey, get the guys down. There's a siege underway." This was it, the real thing. It was going to happen.
The siege was transmitted live and watched across the globe. On day 6, the gunman executed one of the hostages, tossing his body into the street. Britain responded with a raid, broadcast live, stunning the world. The operatives stormed the building in broad daylight. neutralizing the attackers in a dramatic high-risk rescue. The footage of masked commandos descending from the roof became instantly iconic. For a brief moment, all eyes were on a single building in London.
After 6 days and almost 11 hours exactly, the siege at number 16 Prince's Gate is over.
Number 73, the Kashmir earthquake.
Anyone is touched by that. You know, I mean, children have lost their parents, parents had lost their children, whole families were wiped out.
On October 8, 2005, the ground shook from a 7.6 magnitude earthquake that struck near Muzaffarabad in Pakistan-administered Kashmir. Entire towns were reduced to rubble in seconds. Some 90,000 people were killed, more than 100,000 were injured, and millions were left homeless as winter closed in. It was one of the deadliest quakes of the 21st century. The devastation was catastrophic, but the global response was immediate. Relief poured in from across the world. The Americans sent military helicopters, medical teams flew in from Cuba. Financial, food, and logistical support all converged in a rare show of international unity. For a brief moment, the world stopped fighting just long enough to help.
Officials have said that it could be between about 3 and 5 years before all the homes that need to be rebuilt are rebuilt. But we've heard from other officials, there are estimates it could be as long as 8 or even 10 years. So perhaps a decade before this region really gets back on its feet.
Number 72, the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
The third mate and the helmsman at the wheel both say they followed orders. But whether it was miscommunication or poor navigation, the Exxon Valdez did not turn back into the shipping lane when it was supposed to.
It was a slow-motion catastrophe that stained more than just the Alaskan coastline. On March 24, 1989, the Exxon Valdez, a massive oil tanker, slammed into a reef off the Alaskan coast. Its hull gouged. The Valdez spilled nearly 11 million gallons of crude oil into Prince William Sound. The images were unforgettable, shocking the world.
After the Exxon Valdez ran aground, Exxon spent $3.8 billion on cleanup. But the crews only scratched the surface.
Oil-slicked otters, dying birds, blackened water. Roughly 1,300 miles of pristine coastline was devastated. The local fishing economy and ecosystems took decades to recover. The outrage was instant, and protests, lawsuits, and international regulations followed. The spill was a turning point in how the world viewed corporate responsibility and environmental fragility.
Portable pumps are now on the damaged Exxon Valdez, enabling the transfer to continue of the 40 million gallons of oil still on board the vessel. But tonight, fears are growing that the spill is spreading through the waters of the Sound uncontrolled.
Number 71, Jesse Owens at the Olympics.
If you can win the 100-meter dash and be proclaimed the world's fastest man, you have etched your place in sports history.
Jesse Owens' performance at the 1936 Berlin Olympics was less a victory than it was a 4-medal middle finger. A black American athlete, Owens won 4 gold medals under the glaring eye of Adolf Hitler. His dominance shattered Nazi fantasies of Aryan supremacy on their home turf. But Owens wasn't just defying Hitler, he was defying his own nation too.
The winner of the men's 100-meter finals is Jesse Owens in first place with a time of 10.3 seconds.
Back home, he still couldn't sit at the front of the bus. He couldn't use the same facilities as white athletes or even expect a hero's welcome. His performance was a defiant not today to 2 racist regimes at once. The world stood still as he soared, and racists across the world had their bigotry shoved back in their faces.
In the context of the Hitler Olympics, it was a beautiful moment, but it also shows what the Olympics should really be about.
Number 70, Dolly the sheep.
Little Dolly and many other species of animals cloned since, including monkeys, are powerful evidence that we humans can replicate ourselves.
The world saw the future in her fluffy sheep eyes. She was born in 1996, but scientists at the Roslin Institute in Scotland unveiled her in 1997, the first mammal cloned from an adult cell. What looked like an adorable little ewe was actually a scientific breakthrough that shook the foundations of science.
This particular lamb got onto its feet very quickly and started bleating and looking to get its first feed of milk from its mother.
The implications were staggering. Cloning was no longer science fiction. Ethical debates exploded overnight from academia to religious institutions and kitchen tables across the earth. Headlines warned against human clones, predicting designer babies and playing God. But for all the fear, there was also awe. DALL-E was proof positive that we could copy life itself.
This latest research on sheep did not rely on any revolutionary new technology. In fact, many in vitro fertilization clinics use the same equipment. But it's clear this cloning technique still requires some refinement.
Number 69, the Beirut explosion.
حالي يعني مثل خلص انتهت العالم أو ما بعرف شو صاير يعني بهذا النهار ما لازم يكون هيك بالنسبة لإلي إنه لازم يكون غير.
One moment there was a fire at the port. The next, half of Beirut seemed to explode. On August 4th, 2020, a warehouse in Beirut packed with 2,750 tons of ammonium nitrate exploded. Entire neighborhoods were flattened like pancakes. Cars were launched through the air like missiles. The shockwave was felt for miles around. Over 200 people were killed, thousands injured, and hundreds of thousands instantly left without homes. Videos of the blast went viral in seconds. It looked unreal, like a war zone or the end of a movie. But this was real life, and the world watched in stunned silence. In a year already full of crisis, this one hit differently.
It smells like our city is really in ruins and lying under dust and remains and, you know.
Number 68, the election of Barack Obama.
Our stories are singular, but our destiny is shared. And a new dawn of American leadership is at hand.
On November 4th, 2008, history was made. Barack Obama became the first black president of the United States. Massive crowds took to the streets of cities around the world. In Chicago, people wept. In Kenya, they danced. Paris lit up the Eiffel Tower in red, white, and blue. The reaction was a global exhalation of joy. After years of American wars and a global financial crisis, the world was desperate to turn the page. Obama's victory felt to many like a reset button. Much of the world was filled with hope. His Nobel Peace Prize win the very next year furthered that sense of hope. It was a resounding message to the U.S. that their choice of president had international ramifications.
We will win this general election, and together we'll change this country, and we will change the world.
Number 67, U2 incident.
6:26 local time, and I'm airborne. The air outside's below freezing now. I'm aware of the crate I'm flying, U2 number 360.
Nothing kills an international peace summit like one party getting caught red-handed. In 1960, the Soviets shot down an American U-2 spy plane flying miles above their territory. The U.S. tried to play it off as a weather research flight. Then the Soviets pulled the receipts. They produced the wreckage, the photos, and the very much alive pilot, Francis Gary Powers.
I tried to reach the self-destruct, but the plane was already spinning. The centrifugal force is so great I could barely hold on.
The whole thing blew up fast. A major U.S.-Soviet summit was canceled as Cold War tensions flared. The world wrung its hands in terror of nuclear Armageddon as the superpowers squared up over a single exposed lie. For a brief, very uncomfortable moment, it looked like things might spiral out of control. Everyone was paying attention.
In May 1960, America woke up some. Some cherished illusions were shot down with my U-2 that the United States was too honorable to use espionage for a start.
Number 66, Queen Elizabeth's death.
The legacy of her reign was formed, say many, by a profound sense of duty, one that remained with her throughout 7 decades on the throne.
On September 8th, 2022, the world lost a monarch, and an era of British history came to a close. Queen Elizabeth II passed away at age 96. Her 70-year reign spanned everything from Winston Churchill asking that his people fight on the beaches if necessary, to memes about corgis. The response was immediate and global.
She was beloved around the world, and she had an ability to be a convener in her own quiet way.
News alerts lit up across every continent. Crowds gathered in silence outside Buckingham Palace. Millions tuned in to the state funeral, some to mourn, others to celebrate an end to a colonial chapter. Love her or not, Queen Elizabeth had been a steady constant in a chaotic world. For a moment, the entire world's attention narrowed to one velvet-draped casket.
There will be days of mourning. There will be funerals. There will be a state funeral. And I suspect that we will see people coming out in the streets to pay their own respects.
Number 65, the Australian bushfires.
Leading up to the 2019 fires, it was very obvious to people who'd been around for a long time that this summer was going to be something very different.
At the start of 2020, virtually the entire continent of Australia was ablaze. Bushfires scorched over 46 million acres, eating thousands of homes and leaving behind skies so red they looked apocalyptic. Countless animals were killed or displaced, and entire towns were wiped off the map. The images shocked the world. Charred landscapes, burned wildlife, smoke clouds stretched across oceans.
Bateman's Bay is a popular tourist destination, but the most intense blazes here have turned the skies a bright amber.
But then came COVID, and the global spotlight moved on. In Australia, the scars are still fresh. Elsewhere, the disaster vanished into the memory hole almost as quickly as it arrived.
The fires took hold in the heat as temperatures hit the late 30s and winds hampered efforts to bring the blazes under control.
Number 64, the Panama Canal opens.
We can't go through the mountain. We'll have to go over it.
It's hard to imagine that one narrow 40-mile waterway could effectively shrink the planet. Yet that's exactly what happened upon the opening of the Panama Canal. It turned a continent-wide detour into a shortcut. Global commerce was never the same. Construction was brutal, plagued by disease, landslides, and nonstop political maneuvering. When it was done, ships could finally pass between the Atlantic and Pacific without circling South America.
The world is utterly transformed. We go from having an Atlantic and a Pacific Ocean functionally to having one global ocean.
The impact was incalculable. Trade routes were redrawn. Naval strategy evolved overnight. The U.S. cemented its status as a global power. Panama, once a geopolitical afterthought, became one of the most important choke points on Earth. The world felt smaller, faster, and more connected virtually overnight.
After 500 years of people dreaming, now it was dawn.
Number 63, the resignation of Richard Nixon.
Some public men are destined to be loved, and other public men are destined to be disliked. But the most important thing about a public man is not whether he's loved or disliked, but whether he's respected. And I hope to restore respect to the presidency.
Watergate wasn't the first American presidential scandal. It did, however, lead to the first and only presidential resignation. Amidst the turmoil, Republican senators went to the White House begging Nixon to resign. He faced near certain impeachment. To save the tattered shreds of his legacy, Richard Nixon agreed. He appeared on national television, announcing that he would step down.
To leave office before my term is completed is abhorrent to every instinct in my body. But as president, I must put the interests of America first.
Millions tuned in around the globe, stunned as the most powerful man in the world bowed to pressure and disgrace. For Americans, it was a constitutional crisis. For everyone else, it was proof that even the U.S. presidency wasn't untouchable. The next morning, Nixon boarded a helicopter and left the White House for good.
In a moment that has now become iconic, the president boarded his helicopter on the White House's South Lawn.
Number 62, Y2K.
If you have investments, check with your broker and agents to find out their Y2K progress. Look for informed and proactive responses, not just an, "Oh yes, we've got that under control."
As the clock ticked toward midnight on December 31st, 1999, the world braced for digital chaos. Thanks to a programming shortcut, it seemed possible that the world was on the brink of Armageddon. On computers across the world, years were recorded with just 2 digits. When the year turned over, people feared they would read 1900 rather than 2000.
One simple date change for man, one major screw-up for computer.
The glitch could theoretically crash planes or wipe bank accounts. Humanity feared being thrust back into the Stone Age. Governments spent billions preparing for the worst. People stocked up on water, batteries, and canned goods. But when the clock struck midnight, the lights stayed on. Nothing major failed, but for one terrifying moment, the entire planet held its breath.
All day and night, more than 150 workers from 20 agencies were monitoring Y2K problems. But lucky for them, nothing major happened.
Number 61, the Mexico City earthquake. It struck just after dawn. By the time most of the Western Hemisphere was eating breakfast, one of the world's largest cities was in ruins. On September 19, 1985, an 8.0 magnitude earthquake ripped through Mexico City. Estimates of the death toll vary, but most agree that at least 10,000 people lost their lives in the overwhelming destruction. The world responded fast, and aid poured in. Cameras also captured survivors clawing through rubble. While the government stumbled, everyday folks stepped up. The disaster sparked a citizen-led rescue movement that transformed Mexican society, leaving a lasting mark on global disaster response. Mexico shook, but it didn't break.
The earthquake caused losses that will take years of effort and millions of dollars to restore.
Number 60, raiding Tutankhamun's tomb.
November 4, 1922 was very important day in the field of archaeology. It is the first time, actually, that a major tomb to be discovered completely intact like this.
Imagine cracking open a door that hasn't moved in 3,000 years and stepping straight into legend. In 1922, Howard Carter took that step, prying open the tomb of King Tutankhamun. Ripe for plunder by Western museums and collections, the tomb was a gold-stuffed time capsule. The discovery blew the lid off the modern world's obsession with ancient Egypt. It was a story with everything: treasure, mummies, mystery. The media went wild. Egyptomania swept the globe. Photos of ancient treasures splashed across front pages. Museums scrambled to display Egyptian artifacts. Talk of a pharaoh's curse added just the right amount of eerie to the obsession. Museums chased that high for the next century. Tut wasn't a famous pharaoh before Carter, but he sure became one.
No other civilization lasted so long, nor produced such a wealth of information about its culture.
Number 59, the Manchester Arena terror attack.
On Monday night, he made his way to Manchester Arena, along with 21,000 other people who were attending a pop concert. On his back was a bag containing a bomb, which he would detonate at just after 10:30.
May 22, 2017 was supposed to be a night of music, glitter, and pure uncut cotton candy pop joy. It ended in horror and tragedy. Fans were pouring out of an Ariana Grande concert in Manchester, England when a bomber detonated a device in the crowd. 22 people were killed, many of them kids and teens.
People see it as a news story and people see it as something that happens and then it goes away. But you never go a day without thinking about it, do you? You never go an hour without thinking about it.
ISIS claimed credit, calling it revenge on Western intervention in Syria and Iraq. The global response was immediate and typical of the internet age. The world focused completely for a relative 15 minutes. There were worldwide vigils, tributes, and hashtags lighting up the internet. Just weeks later, Grande returned for One Love Manchester, a defiant, emotional concert that turned heartbreak into international solidarity. Number 58, humanity's first powered flight.
There's Wilbur running at the side, and Orville's taking off for the first time in all of history to fly, and he's only going to fly 120 feet, and he's only going to be in the air 12 seconds.
12 seconds. That's all it took to alter the literal trajectory of human progress. It happened a few years after the turn of the 20th century. On the windy dunes of Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, the Wright brothers launched the first successful powered flight in human history. The Wright Flyer didn't fly very far or all that high, but it flew, and that changed everything.
The Wright brothers' incredible innovations allowed them to solve the centuries-old mystery of powered flight.
It was a moment that felt like magic, even if the crowd was just a handful of witnesses and a camera on a tripod. Thanks to the latter, news of the feat rippled across the globe. Imaginations everywhere were set aflame, ushering in the era of aviation. Humanity would walk on the moon just 6.5 decades later.
Orville and Wilbur Wright made man's first 4 controlled flights in a powered airplane. That day, they lifted the world into a new dimension.
Number 57, the Great Crash.
It is impossible to underestimate the shock, a sense of stunned disbelief. People panicked as the market just drops and drops and drops.
1 week, people were living high on the hog. People were actually millionaires, at least on paper. The next week, they were lining up at soup kitchens. In October 1929, the U.S. stock market collapsed in spectacular fashion. Black Thursday, Black Monday, and Black Tuesday wiped out billions of dollars in value.
And so Monday, the market begins to fall even at a steeper rate than it fell on Thursday.
In fact, this would turn out to be one of the very worst days ever in the history of the United States stock market.
It burned the U.S. economy to the ground, igniting the Great Depression. The contagion quickly spread around the world, defining the next decade. Newspapers shouted as fortunes vanished overnight. Banks, governments, and economies felt the pinch across the world. From boardrooms to breadlines, the whole world felt the drop and wouldn't recover for years.
The companies were loaning money, the brokerages were loaning money, and when those prices fell, all that money just disappeared.
Number 56, Yuri Gagarin's spaceflight.
On the 12th of April, 1961, a Soviet Air Force pilot, Yuri Gagarin, became the first human to blast into space.
One moment he was a relatively faceless Soviet fighter pilot. The next, he was the first human in space, and arguably one of the first truly global celebrities. Yuri Gagarin rocketed into orbit, the first person to look down on the big blue marble. The space age had gone into overdrive. He landed a hero not just in the USSR, but everywhere. Gagarin became a global rock star. He received cheers in Cuba, yes, but he was beloved even in the West. He was mobbed in Britain and toasted by world leaders. Gagarin kicked the door open to the stars. For a shining moment, he was the most famous man on Earth, all because he was the first to leave it.
He was a star, but a lonely one, in a society where there were no others to share his glory.
Number 55, the Spanish flu.
What does this disease do? Everyone gets flu, everyone always gets flu, but why is it the strongest that die?
The Great War, the supposed war to end all wars, was coming to a close. It was only then that the real nightmare began. The Spanish flu ripped across the globe like a tidal wave, fast and silent. Streets emptied, bodies piled up, and the death toll soared to an estimated 50 million worldwide. It struck every continent and overwhelmed every medical system. Cities banned public gatherings. Families nailed quarantine signs to their doors. From soldiers in the trenches to villagers in the Arctic, no one felt safe. For a few years, it felt like the entire world had gone still and sick all at once.
Undertakers had to place armed guards around their prized boxes. All over the country, farms and factories shut down. Orderly life began to break down.
Number 54, the People's Republic of China is born.
Mao's vision for the Grand Parade is to achieve something that is, in reality, largely symbolic. In effect, he'll be telling the Chinese people and the outside world that the game is over.
After decades of civil war, foreign invasion, and chaos, a red wave crested over an entire country. Mao Zedong stood atop Tiananmen Gate and declared the birth of a new nation, the People's Republic of China. At that moment, the geopolitical script was upended.
The Chinese civilians in Shanghai were quick to applaud their new masters. Overnight, Shanghai's population became ardently communistic.
Global power dynamics would never be the same. Red flags rose, and Chiang Kai-shek's loyalist forces fled to Taiwan. The Cold War took on a new front in the Far East. Western governments scrambled to react, while communist allies celebrated. Whether seen as revolution or a hostile takeover, the sheer scale of the Chinese reset was impossible to ignore. Number 53, the partition of India.
For decades, Indians had fought to rid themselves of British rule. The independence movement had been kept in check by ruthless military force. But by 1946, everything had changed.
It was one of the largest and bloodiest mass migrations in human history. It all could have been avoided if Great Britain had taken a little more time and effort. When India gained independence, the subcontinent was carved into two new nations, India and Pakistan. What followed was chaos and bloodshed. Roughly 15 million people were uprooted overnight based on religion.
I had been in pro-Nehru fellow, but that evening I did not feel, because I thought for the leaders having been truly responsible for all this havoc.
Trains full of civilians were massacred as they crossed new borders. Cities burned. The violence was staggering. Estimates say up to 2 million people were killed. The scars are still visible today. Families were split, homes abandoned, identities rewritten. Around the world, headlines struggled to capture the scale of what was happening. Freedom came with a cost, and the consequences haven't stopped since.
Mountbatten decided to accelerate it even faster.
partly because he found his control and the control of the British soldiers over India slipping. And so he accelerated it.
Number 52, the Russian Revolution.
Workers see their economic conditions deteriorating. They see the shortage of foodstuffs. They see factory closures and layoffs, and they want action.
The Russian Empire felt like a house of cards. In 1917, the countryside exploded into revolution. Its first goal was to topple the Tsarist monarchy. The ruling Romanov family fled and went into hiding, but were discovered by Bolshevik forces and massacred in a basement. News of the Romanovs' brutal deaths shocked Europe, sealing the end of an ancient dynasty. Without an organizing force, civil war descended upon Russia. Out of the chaos rose Lenin, the Soviet Union, and a whole new world order. Around the world, monarchies shuddered and revolutionaries took notes. A global superpower had been born in blood.
Lenin simply got an unexpected lucky break that allowed him to turn a revolution in the name of the Soviets into a kind of a Bolshevik revolution.
Number 51, Germany invades Poland.
I spent much of my time ducking into cellars, where German planes were almost constantly in the sky, and huge craters were blasted in the streets, sometimes almost at my feet.
Europe had been holding its breath for months, praying for cooler heads to prevail. They didn't fully understand the fascists with whom they were dealing. On September 1st, 1939, German tanks crossed the Polish border. Nazi Germany launched a brutal blitzkrieg that tore through the country with terrifying speed. Civilians were bombed from the sky. Cities crumbled. Within 48 hours, Britain and France declared war. World War II had begun. The invasion shattered any illusion of peace, putting the entire planet on notice. Newsreels projected the horror on silver screens from the Pacific to the Atlantic. In a matter of a few days, the 20th century's deadliest chapter had begun.
Deutschen werden gewinnen. Noch 1-2 Tage. Dann werden sie hier einmarschieren.
Es ist alles deine Schuld. Du hast gesagt, hier wären wir sicher. Sie würden es nie wagen, diesen Krieg anzufangen.
Number 50, the Le Mans disaster. The Le Mans disaster on June 11, 1955 was easily one of the greatest tragedies in the history of modern sports. In a heartbeat, the world's most prestigious endurance race became a heartbreaking nightmare. At 125 miles per hour, Pierre Levesque's Mercedes collided with another car, launching whole chunks of his vehicle into the crowd. Shrapnel rained down like metal confetti, killing 83 spectators and the driver himself. The scene was chaos. Smoke, fire, and the eerie sound of silence that follows shock. Yet the race went on, as organizers feared that halting it would cause panic. The disaster forced motorsport to confront its recklessness, leading to sweeping safety reforms. Number 49, the Lockerbie bombing. Around 7 p.m. on the night of December 21st, 1988, Pan Am Transatlantic Flight 103 was cruising over the small Scottish town of Lockerbie. It was on its way to a short stopover in New York on its way to Detroit.
The town is settling down as best it can to a tragedy which has destroyed Christmas for the community. Local people say they can hardly find the words to express their grief at a catastrophe many of them actually witnessed.
Suddenly, a suitcase bomb detonated in the cargo hold, shattering the jumbo jet into fiery fragments. All 259 souls aboard perished in an instant. 11 more on the ground were slain by fiery debris. The night sky burned, and the quiet town was strewn with devastation. Homes were crushed, fields set ablaze. The terrorist bombing spurred a relentless quest for justice, exposing a dark web of geopolitical intrigue. After a 3-year investigation, warrants were issued for a pair of Libyan nationals.
For some, the death of al-Megrahi, the only person ever to be convicted of the bombing, means that some of the questions over what happened may never be answered. But the truth is, his passing doesn't change any of this.
Number 48, the Tunguska event. At a sleepy dawn on June 30th, 1908, a massive explosion flattened over 800 square miles of remote Siberian forest. The force snapped 80 million trees like matchsticks.
A shockwave circles the world, leaving its mark on seismographs everywhere. But no one can understand where it has come from. It is 20 years before Soviet scientists discover the true scale of the disaster.
Witnesses spoke of a blinding light, a deafening boom, and a searing heat wave. Yet no crater was ever found. Was it a meteor? A comet? An alien ship gone rogue? Theories abound, but no answers are certain. What is clear is the power unleashed. Estimates place the blast at somewhere between 3 and 50 megatons of TNT, rivaling many nuclear blasts of the 20th century.
They say that the Tunguska explosion had the force of more than 1,000 Hiroshimas. millions of pine trees, larches and birches are destroyed by the pressure wave and the fires.
The Tunguska event left few possible casualties, just a haunting reminder of nature's potential fury and a question mark etched into Earth's history. Number 47. Freddie Mercury dies of AIDS. Freddie Mercury, the electrifying frontman of Queen, was diagnosed with AIDS in April of 1987 after battling symptoms for years.
He was obviously suffering, and we didn't know what it was, and rumour. And so he did sit us down at one point, and he said, look, you probably know what I'm going to say. You know what I'm suffering from. You know what the problem is, but I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Mercury kept his diagnosis quiet for the next 4 years. On November 24, 1991, Mercury's voice, once capable of shaking stadiums and hearts alike, fell silent. The man who gave us Bohemian Rhapsody and We Are the Champions left a legacy of unapologetic brilliance, flamboyance, and raw talent. His death was more than the end of a musical era. It spotlighted the devastating toll of the AIDS epidemic, igniting global awareness and empathy. Fans lit candles and blasted Queen anthems into the night. They mourned a legend, a force of nature whose music will forever keep us rocking.
Fans at his home in West London mourned the best-known British star to have died from the disease. But AIDS charities believe his greatest gift to his fans was to have openly admitted he was a sufferer.
Number 46. The Chilean mining accident. Trapped 2,300 feet underground for 69 days, 33 Chilean miners turned a nightmare into a global story of hope. After the San Jose mine collapsed, the men rationed food, sang songs, and clung to survival in suffocating darkness.
The 33 miners have endured a hellish 2 months in the sweltering, claustrophobic confines of the collapsed mine. 90-degree heat, 90% humidity.
Above ground, engineers and rescuers raced against time, drilling through solid rock to send supplies. Eventually, they sent in the Phoenix capsule, a tiny metal lifeboat that became their lifeline to the surface. When the first miner emerged, caked in dust but alive, cheers echoed around the world. One by one they rose, each rescue a victory over despair.
Again and again and again, prayers answered.
Number 45. The Bhopal disaster. Imagine waking up in the dead of night to discover that the very air around you had turned deadly. This was the fate of Bhopal, India, the night of December 2nd to 3rd, 1984.
The scenes are simply hellish. So much suffering from India's invisible killer. At one point, an official said 1 death was being recorded every minute from the poison gas leak in the city of Bhopal.
A Union Carbide pesticide plant leaked tons of methyl isocyanate gas, creating a silent, invisible killer. Thousands died in their sleep. Others woke to burning lungs and blinded eyes, stumbling through streets filled with chaos and despair. By morning, thousands of lives were lost. The death toll climbed to tens of thousands in the years that followed.
In Bhopal today, the survivors of the poison gas disaster were visited by Nobel Peace Prize winner Mother Teresa.
At 74, she is bent but hardly broken by what she has seen. She tries to comfort by listening. These men saying, "We can hardly see anymore."
The disaster left a scar that would never fully heal. It was one of the deadliest industrial tragedies in history, a haunting reminder of the catastrophic cost of negligence. The poison lingered long after the gas cleared. Number 44. The Fukushima nuclear disaster. When the Earth shook off Japan's coast on March 11, 2011, the disaster didn't stop there. A tsunami surged inland, devastating towns and overwhelming the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant.
The tsunami flooded the nuclear power plant. Result? Massive overheating, and reactors 1, 2, and 3 suffered meltdowns.
The seawater breached defenses, flooded reactors, and triggered a nuclear meltdown. Radioactive plumes were released into the air. Entire communities were forced to flee, leaving behind homes and memories. The disaster was a cascade of failures, natural, human, and technological, that reignited fears of nuclear energy worldwide. Cleanup efforts continue to this day, a stark reminder of the delicate balance between progress and peril.
Agriculture and the Daiichi plant were once at the heart of Fukushima's local economy. Now the unusable land is being transformed to create clean energy and a potential new source of income.
Number 43. Nelson Mandela's passing. Nelson Mandela spent 27 years in prison fighting apartheid. When he was finally released from his unjust imprisonment, he emerged with a vision of unity instead of bitterness.
And in 1990, the once young, strong boxer was released, emerging as a slow-moving statesman, blinking into the bright light of freedom.
From revolutionary to reconciler, he became South Africa's first black president, a symbol of justice and forgiveness. He died December 5, 2013, at the age of 95. His passing was viewed by many around the world as the loss of humanity's greatest moral compass. Leaders from every corner of the planet gathered to honor him.
But the world couldn't let go. The calls kept coming. To advise, to speak out, to just be that calming, kind presence. And truthfully, he obliged, always seemingly beaming.
100,000 mourners paid respect as his body laid in state. His funeral wasn't just the passing of a single man, but of an era in human history. Number 42, the Black Death. In the mid-14th century, death rode comfortably on the backs of fleas and rats. Beginning in Asia, the bubonic plague eventually spread to northern Africa and Europe.
People in harbor towns, then inland villages and towns, fell terribly, horribly ill.
It became known as the Black Death. The pandemic killed an estimated 25 to 50 million people, including as much as half of Europe's population. Some believe the toll may have been as high as 200 million worldwide. Lymph nodes swelled, fevers raged, and despair gripped every village and city it touched. Streets overflowed with bodies as fear and superstition replaced reason. The plague didn't just decimate populations, it shattered feudal systems, transformed economies, and rewrote the social order.
Those who survived began to question the authority of the bishops and the nobles. With so many dead, there were labor shortages across Europe. The workers who were left demanded higher wages, but were refused. By the end of the 14th century, peasant revolts broke out in Italy, France, and England.
Survivors faced a changed world, one where labor had new value and religion faced new doubt. Number 41, the Rwandan genocide. The world learned a harsh lesson in the spring and summer of 1994. It only takes 100 days to commit a massive genocide. Triggered by the assassination of President Juvenal Habyarimana, violence spread quickly.
When the president's plane crashed, Hutu extremists blamed the RPF and started a campaign of slaughter.
Extremist Hutu militias slaughtered some 800,000 people. Mostly Tutsi men, women, and children, along with moderate Hutus who opposed the violence. Neighbors turned on neighbors. Machetes became tools of annihilation. The international community largely watched in silence, frozen by bureaucracy and indifference. Only after the bodies filled rivers and villages lay in ruins did the world begin to reckon with its failure. Rwanda emerged scarred but determined, and has attempted to rebuild from ashes.
I too am reconciling with my home. And like many Rwandans, I can see glimpses of hope, of strength, of resilience.
Number 40, Haiti earthquake. The centuries-long history of the island nation of Haiti has been one filled with tragedy and sorrow. Even so, neither the country nor the world at large were prepared for the scope of the 2010 disaster. On January 12th, the ground beneath Haiti shook with catastrophic force.
Magnitude 7.0 is a very major quake. And this one was shallow and, of course, as you've noted, near a very large population center. So we have, unfortunately, the feeling that this is going to be a very devastating event.
A magnitude 7.0 earthquake struck near the capital, leveling buildings and with casualties estimated by some at 230,000 lives. The devastation was immense. Hospitals crumbled, schools collapsed, and entire districts were reduced to rubble. Survivors faced unimaginable conditions. Food, water, and shelter were scarce. Aftershocks rattled their fragile hope. International aid poured in, but corruption and logistical challenges hampered recovery.
Much of the funds never reached Haitian hands.
The quake exposed deep-rooted poverty and systemic vulnerability, turning a natural disaster into a humanitarian crisis. Number 39, the Sputniks. In today's modern society driven by satellite technology, it can be hard to imagine the significance of Sputnik. Launched by the Soviet Union on October 4, 1957, Sputnik 1 became the first human-made object to orbit Earth.
Until 2 days ago, that sound had never been heard on this Earth. Suddenly, it has become as much a part of 20th century life as the whir of your vacuum cleaner. It's a report from man's farthest frontier, the radio signal transmitted by the Soviet Sputnik.
Its beeping signal, simple yet profound, echoed around the globe, marking the dawn of the space age. For the first time, humanity looked skyward not for stars, but for something of its own creation. The tiny satellite orbited for just 21 days before its batteries died, but its impact was seismic.
Sputnik sent a shockwave through America and the world, not because of what it did,
but because of what it meant.
Americans from Maine to California trembled with fear about what this might mean for the future. Sputnik was the starting gun for the space race. Number 38, the invasion of Iraq. After quickly unseating the Taliban after the 9/11 attack, much of the world assumed that America's thirst for vengeance was slaked. But as 2002 progressed, it was clear that the U.S. government was laying the groundwork for invading Iraq as well.
The Americans called the massive air raids with which they opened the war shock and awe. They claimed, wrongly, that this was the way to make the Middle East safer for everyone.
In March 2003, the United States and its allies launched a shock and awe campaign, beginning the invasion of Iraq. It was framed as a mission to disarm Saddam Hussein of weapons of mass destruction. After the swift removal of Saddam's Ba'athist Party, the war quickly spiraled into a protracted conflict. Despite the lack of WMD, American forces remained. Years of chaos followed. Insurgency, sectarian violence, and a humanitarian crisis took the lives of tens of thousands and completely unsettled the region.
It was intervention on a dramatic scale, and while it destroyed Saddam's Ba'athist state, the struggle to define a new Iraq continues.
Number 37, the Mumbai attacks. On November 26, 2008, terror struck the heart of Mumbai. 10 militants from the Lakshari Taiba organization launched a coordinated assault across the city.
This was terror that came from the sea. Rubber boats were apparently used to ferry the attackers ashore, possibly from this Indian fishing boat, which was reported hijacked. Once ashore, the attackers fanned out toward their planned targets.
They targeted luxury hotels, a train station, a cafe, and a Jewish center. For 3 harrowing days, gunfire and explosions turned sections of Mumbai into war zones. When the dust settled, 166 victims had perished with hundreds injured.
The Battle of Mumbai lasted 3 days. It may take a lot longer than that to piece together exactly how it was planned.
The world watched as hostages were taken, landmarks burned, and the iconic Taj Mahal Palace Hotel became a battlefield. Amid the carnage, stories of bravery emerged. Hotel staff shielded guests. First responders risked their lives. Ordinary citizens aided strangers. Number 36, Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 disappears. Malaysia Airlines Flight MH370 vanished without a trace, leaving 239 passengers and crew lost to one of aviation's greatest mysteries. Departing Kuala Lumpur for Beijing, the plane's communication systems went silent.
The Beijing-bound flight departed Kuala Lumpur and was scheduled to land in Beijing at 6:30 a.m. It went missing 2 hours into the flight.
It veered off course, disappearing from radar. Despite a massive international search spanning the Indian Ocean, only scattered debris has ever been found. The disappearance became a media phenomenon. Cable news networks devoted round-the-clock coverage to the event. Social media became a breeding ground for conspiracies. The cause of the disappearance remains unknown, though theories abound.
This broken bit of airplane wreckage, more than 6 feet long, washed up on the French island of Reunion in the Indian Ocean. A first step toward closure for the families who've had no real answers until now.
Some speculate mechanical failure, others an attack or sabotage. No answers have surfaced. Number 35, the Charlie Hebdo shooting. The Paris office of Charlie Hebdo became a scene of terror on January 7, 2015. 2 gunmen stormed the building, killing 12 people, including renowned cartoonists and staff.
Shortly after this morning's attack, the French president came to issue a message of defiance on behalf of his nation.
The attackers, claiming allegiance to al-Qaeda, targeted the satirical magazine for its controversial depictions of the Prophet Muhammad. The assault was swift and brutal, leaving France shaken. In its aftermath, the world grappled with the balance between free expression and religious sensitivity. The attack became a symbol for the conflict between Western populations over immigration.
After the worst attack in decades in France, massive vigils overnight, so many people pouring into the streets to show their support. Just moments ago, a moment of silence at Notre Dame, right in the center of Paris.
Millions marched under the banner, Je suis Charlie. Number 34, the death of the King of Pop. The King of Pop's final curtain call came on June 25, 2009, when Michael Jackson was pronounced dead at just 50 years old. News of his passing spread like wildfire, stopping the world in its tracks.
It was an announcement that shocked the world. Michael Jackson, dead at 50 years old.
I couldn't believe that I was announcing my brother's death for the world.
A cardiac arrest, later linked to an overdose of prescription drugs, ended the life of a man who redefined music, dance, and fame. Jackson's influence was unparalleled, and he was arguably the most famous celebrity on the planet. But Jackson's life was as complicated as his genius, marked by controversy and scandal. His death became a moment of collective reflection. Millions debated his legacy and mourned the end of both a performer and a cultural phenomenon.
Sorrow, shock, and so many unanswered questions.
Number 33, the sinking of the Titanic. The Titanic, hailed as the unsinkable marvel of the modern age, met a tragic fate on its maiden voyage.
It's the most infamous ship in all history. The Titanic.
Striking an iceberg in the icy North Atlantic on April 14, 1912, the luxury liner sank beneath the waves, taking over 1,500 lives with it. What began as a symbol of human ingenuity turned into a haunting reminder of its hubris. The lifeboats were too few, the warnings unheeded, and the icy waters unforgiving.
The shipbuilders believed that they had thought of everything when building the Titanic, but they were sadly mistaken.
Survivors told tales of bravery and despair, of a band playing as the ship disappeared into the night. The sinking of the Titanic was more than a maritime disaster. It was a watershed moment. Its sinking led to the creation of the International Ice Patrol and stricter lifeboat regulations worldwide. Number 32, the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami. Christmas of 2004 was an unhappy moment for a large swath of the planet. On December 26th, a massive undersea earthquake, registering a magnitude of 9.1, unleashed towering waves that crashed into coastlines across more than a dozen countries, from Indonesia to Somalia.
It started with an undersea earthquake, one of the biggest in recorded history.
Entire towns were swept away, and over 230,000 lives were lost. The devastation was unimaginable. Homes were obliterated, families torn apart, and survivors left clinging to wreckage. The global response was unprecedented. Billions of dollars in aid and support poured into the nations affected.
The response of the international community was quick, with over $14 billion donated in humanitarian aid. But has that been enough to deal with the problems of those most affected?
It was a stark reminder of nature's raw power. Thankfully, it was also a unifying moment, as the world banded together to rebuild from the depths of the ocean's fury. Number 31, the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. As tenuous as the world may seem today, remember, in 1914, the death of one man was the fallen domino that dragged the entire world into war.
Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the throne of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Today, he will be assassinated. This is the spark which will ignite the First World War.
As the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, Franz Ferdinand's death at the hands of a Bosnian Serb nationalist was a disaster. What seemed like a localized act of rebellion escalated as alliances were invoked. Within weeks, Europe was engulfed in war. Interests in Asia, the South Pacific, and Africa drew more colonial powers into the conflict.
Just 6 weeks after a man was killed by a single bullet, the alliances were triggered. Germany invaded France, and the First World War had begun.
The assassination exposed a powder keg. Ethnic rivalries and imperial ambitions were all just waiting for a spark. The bullets fired in Sarajevo didn't just end a life. They ended an era, unleashing chaos that would reshape the course of history. Number 30, the Israel-Hamas War. The Israeli-Palestinian conflict has been ongoing for 3/4 of a century, with the 2023 Israel-Hamas war adding another tragic and bloody chapter.
There are so many families across Israel asking, where was the army? Why didn't they stop this? What do you tell those families?
I tell them it's the responsibility of the army. It's the responsibility of the army for the intelligence. It's our responsibility to guard the people of Israel. We failed on Saturday. This is our responsibility. But now we're fighting.
This latest conflict began when the Palestinian political and militant group Hamas launched a surprise attack on the 7th of October 2023, killing around 1,200 Israelis, mostly civilians. They also took 250 Israelis hostage, demanding the release of Palestinian prisoners.
This is a massive terrorist attack that is gunning down Israeli civilians in their towns, in their homes, and as we've seen so graphically, literally dragging people across the border with Gaza.
In retaliation, Israel dropped 6,000 bombs on Gaza over 6 days and launched a ground invasion. As of late 2024, over 45,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed, most of them women and children. There have been widespread global protests, and Gaza has collapsed into a humanitarian crisis. Number 29, the Tiananmen Square protests and massacre. In China, references to this event, also known as the June 4th incident, are heavily censored. In the spring of 1989, student-led demonstrations were held in Tiananmen Square, Beijing, calling for democracy and greater civil liberties.
They turned Tiananmen Square, the country's symbol of sovereignty, into a hub of dissent and protest. They want a crackdown on corruption. They want freedom of press. They call for an awakening to reform and progress in China.
The protests spread to hundreds of cities, with workers joining them, angry over inflation, corruption, and the erosion of welfare. Declaring martial law, the government sent soldiers and tanks into the square. The death toll is disputed, ranging from hundreds to thousands.
Estimates run from several hundred to over 10,000. Some argue that by shooting at civilians, the Communist Party lost its legitimacy to rule, and with it, an opportunity for political modernization.
Famously, at least outside of China, the photo of an unknown man facing off against a column of tanks has become an enduring symbol of the event. Today, public displays of mourning for the victims are banned, although commemorations still sometimes reportedly occur in secret. Number 28, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. Also known as the BP oil spill, this unfortunately wasn't the first industrial disaster to devastate our marine habitats, but it remains the largest on record. It began on April 20th, due to an explosion on the Deepwater Horizon oil platform.
And there's 30,000 of these workers every day that go in the Gulf to do this work, and they're well trained, but and they work to try to not have these accidents. But on this day, something went wrong, and now we're working with BP and we're Transocean to try to find the cause.
The fallout from this disaster resulted in 205 million gallons of oil discharged into the Gulf of Mexico, and effects were still being felt years after the initial disaster.
Birds are still on these islands coming in here feeding. So you can just imagine the contamination that takes place within the wildlife.
In fact, reports from 2012 stated that the oil refineries from Deepwater Horizon were still leaking, despite an official statement from 2010 that claimed the well was sealed. Number 27, the Oklahoma City bombing. This domestic terrorist attack shocked the nation. On April 19, 1995, anti-government white supremacists Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols detonated a truck full of explosives in front of the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City.
In a blink, the sky dark with a plume of deep black smoke.
There was a tremendous explosion, a massive explosion at the federal building in the center of the city, the A.P. Murrah building.
We have a large column of smoke to be south of this address. Are you going to check on that?
The explosion killed 168 people and injured 680 others. The Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building was left in ruins, and the force of the blast damaged cars and buildings over a dozen blocks away. McVeigh and Nichols had sought to spark a revolution.
McVeigh became disaffected, latching onto a growing pro-gun, anti-government ideology that gained traction in the 1990s in the aftermath of federal law enforcement actions at Ruby Ridge, Idaho.
To this day, it is the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in United States history. Number 26, the Iran hostage crisis. In 1953, British and American intelligence agencies orchestrated a coup against democratically elected Iranian Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh, who had nationalized Iran's oil industry. With U.S. support, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi became Iran's true ruler.
The Shah's power is maintained by a vicious secret police and the fifth largest military on Earth, equipped with American weapons.
Fast forward to the Islamic Revolution of 1979, and the Shah, seen as a Western puppet, was overthrown, replaced with the theocratic government of Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. In the middle of this revolution, militarized college students took 52 Americans hostage in the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. For over a year, President Jimmy Carter sought to negotiate their return, but only after 444 days were they released, after a pledge from the U.S. not to intervene in Iranian affairs.
It was a long and harrowing ordeal for the hostages, their families, and indeed the entire nation. And it was an ordeal that plagued the presidency of Jimmy Carter, an ordeal whose final resolution eluded his presidency by less than an hour.
Number 25, the November 2015 Paris attacks. As mentioned earlier, in January 2015, France was left reeling from an Islamic terrorist attack on satirical magazine Charlie Hebdo, in which 12 staff were killed. Several other smaller attacks occurred throughout the year. on November 13th. These culminated in by far the deadliest. That night, in a series of coordinated attacks, terrorists detonated explosive vests and opened fire in streets and public venues in Paris.
Only minutes later, gunmen opened fire on several bars and restaurants in eastern Paris.
3 gunmen stormed a concert at the Bataclan Theatre, killing 90 people. In all, 130 lives were taken. The attacks sent shockwaves not only through France, but also reverberated around the world. Number 24, John Lennon is assassinated. It's safe to say that John Lennon is one of the most influential singer-songwriters of all time. Even after leaving the Beatles in 1969, he enjoyed enormous popularity and success. He also became well known for his activism.
Is there not a more positive way of demonstrating in favor of peace than sitting in bed with 3 square meals a day?
It's very positive.
However, on December 8, 1980, obsessive fan Mark David Chapman fatally shot him outside the Dakota Apartments in New York City. When news broke on ABC's Monday Night Football, fans were shocked and horrified. For many, the world seemed to stop turning.
An unspeakable tragedy confirmed to us by ABC News in New York City. John Lennon, outside of his apartment building on the west side of New York City, the most famous perhaps of all of the Beatles, shot twice in the back.
Around the globe, fans were united in mourning for a man whose music meant so much to so many. Number 23, Hurricane Katrina. This Category 5 hurricane was devastating not only due to its intensity, but also a failure of flood control systems and slow government response. On August 29, 2005, the hurricane made landfall in Louisiana.
It was quickly predicted to become a catastrophic event.
My fear is absolutely that the models are correct.
It is gaining strength again. It is now stalking the Gulf Coast.
It rapidly doubled in size and intensified into a Category 5 hurricane.
The storm surge breached New Orleans levees and flooded the city. Tens of thousands of residents had not evacuated. It didn't matter if you were from there. TV and radio audiences could feel the distress and panic in the air. Critics argued that race and class were factors in the slow local and federal response.
This story ends up being the roadmap, the instruction booklet, the how-to story of dealing with disaster. It also tells you what not to do.
The hurricane left an estimated 1,392 dead in its wake, making it one of the deadliest in U.S. history. Number 22, the fall of Saigon. Seeing photos of the fall of Saigon, you might be reminded of the more recent 2021 Kabul airlift in Afghanistan. Both involved scenes of panic and powerful images of last-minute evacuation.
The hardest part was the waiting. Many people said it was unnerving to be waiting for a ride to safety and to be hearing fighting all around you.
On April 30th, 1975, North Vietnamese forces captured Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, marking the end of the deadly and divisive Vietnam War. The iconic photo of a helicopter evacuation from the roof of the U.S. Embassy symbolized the desperate and dramatic nature of the fall.
Yes, we've chosen to leave, but we've chosen to leave because it's no longer defendable with the resources that we have chosen to commit, and the limits that we have put on our involvement in South Vietnam.
In the aftermath, Vietnam was reunified under communist rule, and the U.S. began to significantly rethink its foreign policies. Number 21, the Jonestown Massacre. Founded in Indiana in 1954, Jim Jones's People's Temple preached a message nominally based on Christianity, socialism, and civil rights.
His driving force was less the Bible than social justice. He was very much ahead of the current climate in terms of race relations and his desire to create an integrated society.
But something very dark lurked under the surface. In the 1970s, Jones fled accusations of abuse and fake miracles to a remote settlement in Guyana. Over time, the charismatic leader became paranoid and obsessed with domination over his faithful. Further reports of abuse led to a fact-finding mission from U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan. He never returned, murdered by Jones's Red Brigade. Jones ordered his over 900 followers, a third of them minors, to take their own lives by drinking Flavor Aid laced with cyanide.
This time, Jones served a punch spiked with cyanide. More than 900 died.
The tragedy left the public in shock and horror, and is the origin of the expression drinking the Kool-Aid. Number 20, Nelson Mandela released. In 1964, South African revolutionary leader Nelson Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment. 4 years, he had fought against apartheid, the system of racial segregation that privileged the country's white population and disenfranchised people of color. Even from prison, he remained committed to this cause, communicating with political leaders and gaining worldwide attention.
The fact that you could sit alone and think gave us a wonderful opportunity to change ourselves, your behavior.
As civil unrest grew, Mandela was finally released from prison in 1990, 27 years after he was sentenced. His release was broadcast around the world.
Heroic sacrifices have made it possible for me to be here today.
In a historic speech, he affirmed his commitment to peace, but also to the ongoing struggle against the violence of apartheid. Just 4 years later, he would go on to become the country's first black president. Number 19, the 2021 United States Capitol attack. On January 6, 2021, scenes of carnage in the U.S. Capitol, Washington, D.C., shocked Americans watching the riot unfold on TV. USA! USA! At a rally before the attack, outgoing President Donald Trump told supporters the election had been stolen and urged them to march to the Capitol building. Debunked by courts, state audits, and federal agencies, this claim was part of a campaign to overturn the election results and reinstall Trump as president.
This was a fraudulent election, but we can't play into the hands of these people.
Within hours, 2,000 angry Trump supporters broke into the Capitol building, assaulting police and searching for lawmakers gathered to formalize Joe Biden's victory. Among them were members of far-right militias and neo-fascist groups, some of them armed. The insurrection failed, with lawmakers racing to safety before the mob reached them. Number 18, the Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. There were a lot of eyes on Cape Canaveral, Florida when Challenger finally launched on January 28, 1986. Due to technical issues and bad weather, the flight had been delayed multiple times.
Liftoff of the 25th Space Shuttle mission, and it has cleared the tower.
On launch day, CNN broadcast live nationwide coverage. NASA had organized for children to watch from schools to promote their Teacher in Space project, which had added teacher-turned-astronaut Krista McAuliffe to the crew. But viewers' hopes turned to horror as the shuttle disintegrated during its ascent, claiming the lives of all 7 crew members.
We have a report from the flight dynamics officer that the vehicle has exploded.
The Challenger's final flight had lasted only 73 seconds. Number 17, the 1972 Summer Olympics. The 1972 Olympic Games in West Germany were the first to be held in the region since Nazi dictator Adolf Hitler used the event as a platform for propaganda in 1936. Sadly, the September Games would become even more infamous, etching out their own bleak mark in history. After infiltrating the Olympic Village, 8 armed men from the Palestinian terrorist group Black September killed 2 Israeli Olympic team members and took 9 more hostage.
The terrorists want hundreds of Palestinian prisoners released from Israeli jails. Nothing else will do.
After 2 grueling days of negotiation, the hostage crisis was brought to a violent end. The rescue attempt was botched, claiming the lives of all hostages and a police officer. Number 16, the O.J. Simpson murder trial verdict. It was the trial of the century, and the verdict left the public reeling.
Remember these words. If it doesn't fit, you must acquit.
After Nicole Brown Simpson and her friend Ron Goldman were stabbed to death in June 1994, Brown's ex-husband, former footballer and actor O.J. Simpson, became the prime suspect. Before her death, Brown had said that Simpson had abused and threatened to kill her. Every aspect of the case was highly publicized, from the car chase that saw him arrested to the lengthy trial. The coverage hooked viewers, and everyone had an opinion. On October 3, 1995, the jury returned a verdict of not guilty.
We, the jury, in the above entitled action, find the defendant Orenthal James Simpson not guilty of the crime of murder.
For some, it was a vindication. To others, a travesty of justice, in which a celebrity had gotten away with murder. Number 15, the death of Osama bin Laden. In the wake of the September 11th attacks in 2001, U.S. President George W. Bush announced the beginning of a war on terror. The first stage of this war was the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan to hunt down Osama bin Laden and his terrorist group, Al-Qaeda.
In this conflict, America faces an enemy who has no regard for conventions of war or rules of morality.
This manhunt continued for almost a decade as bin Laden evaded capture. However, in 2011, the CIA tracked him down to a compound in Pakistan. In a helicopter raid codenamed Operation Neptune Spear on May 2nd, bin Laden was killed.
After a firefight, they killed Osama bin Laden and took custody of his body.
For those who vividly recalled the events of 9/11, President Obama's announcement that the Al-Qaeda leader was dead was a landmark event. Number 14, Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For months, the buildup of Russian forces along Ukraine's border had the world on edge. Would Russian President Vladimir Putin really give the order to invade? In 2014, Ukrainians had revolted against a pro-Moscow government, sick of corruption and abuse of power. Their success led Russia to annex Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula. In February 2022, Putin launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, furious at the country's aspiration to join NATO.
I consider it necessary to immediately recognize the independence and sovereignty of the Donetsk and Lugansk People's Republics.
In response, the international community hit Russia with severe economic sanctions. Around the world, everyone's eyes have been glued to their screens, watching the outgunned Ukrainians hold off the invading forces.
If we don't stand up, we don't have a country to defend.
Number 13, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s speech may be remembered for just 4 words, but they are arguably among the most powerful ever spoken.
I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character.
The Baptist minister had chosen his profession because he felt sermons were, quote, a respectful force for ideas, even social protest. King oversaw the Montgomery bus boycott and became the leader of civil rights organization SCLC. In August 1963, he helped organize a march of 250,000 people to Washington, D.C. to peacefully protest for equal rights for African Americans.
With this faith, we will be able to transform the jangling discords of our nation into a beautiful symphony of brotherhood.
On the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, he told listeners that he dreamt of a world free of racism and oppression. His impassioned words were heard far and wide, becoming a defining moment in the civil rights movement. They remain iconic today.
Let freedom ring from the snow-capped Rockies of Colorado. Let freedom ring from the curvaceous slopes of California.
Number 12, the death of Diana, Princess of Wales. Although she was no longer Her Royal Highness in 1997, having lost her title after her divorce from Prince Charles, Diana remained a popular figure for the Commonwealth and beyond.
We interrupt this film to tell you we are getting reports that Diana, Princess of Wales, has been badly injured in a car crash in France.
Her sudden death in a car accident as she fled paparazzi occurred in the early hours of August 31st, while the British public were still asleep. Diana's driver, who had been intoxicated at the time, and Egyptian producer Dodi Fayed also died in the crash. When people in the UK woke and learned the news, the country was left shocked and in mourning. The death of the people's princess was felt around the world.
Goodbye, Rose. May you well grow in our hearts. You are the greatest place to serve.
Number 11, the fall of the Berlin Wall. After World War II, the Allies split Germany into East and West. The Soviet Union controlled the East, while the US, UK, and France controlled the West. Eventually, East and West became separate republics, but the flight of East Germans to the more affluent West prompted the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961. Dividing friends and families, the wall became a symbol of the Iron Curtain separating Western Europe and the Soviet bloc. In the 80s, however, massive protests and waves of refugees leaving East Germany led the government to relax rules for immigration. On the evening of November 9, 1989, East Germans gathered at the wall.
Elsewhere, they were swarming over the wall, hacking at it with hammers, picks and chisels, clawing at it with bare hands.
Rather than open fire, border guards stood down, and the world watched as Germany became one again. Number 10. The assassination of John F. Kennedy. JFK holds a unique place in political history. The World War II veteran was the President of the United States during the Cuban Missile Crisis and the commencement of the space race.
We go into space because whatever mankind must undertake, free men must fully share.
He was also the first Catholic president and was elected off the back of the first televised presidential debates. Yet, despite all of this, his time in office lasted less than 3 years before he was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald in Dallas on November 22, 1963. Although the moment itself was caught on camera, the footage was not broadcast live. However, the breaking news was delivered to the American people as events transpired.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time.
The country went into mourning, and millions watched his funeral on television.
Now that he is relieved of the almost superhuman burden we imposed on him, may he rest in peace.
Number 9. The Chernobyl disaster. At first, the details of this disaster were shrouded in secrecy.
There has been a nuclear accident in the Soviet Union, and the Soviets have admitted that it happened.
But word soon got out. During a safety test on April 26, 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant near Pripyat in Soviet Ukraine went into meltdown. The fault of design flaws and negligent operators. The subsequent explosion threw radioactive particles into the atmosphere. It was Sweden who alerted the world 2 days later, when radiation hundreds of miles away set off alarms.
The first word that something was seriously wrong came from this power plant in eastern Sweden, where workers coming on the job registered abnormally high levels of radiation.
As the truth was gradually revealed, the scale of the disaster became evident. The meltdown led directly to the deaths of 31 people, and to many more from radiation-induced cancer in the years afterwards. Number 8. The attack on Pearl Harbor. It might be known as the Second World War, but for the first few years, the U.S. waited out the conflict raging across Europe. That all changed on December 7, 1941, when Japan launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. Several ships were sunk, and 188 aircraft destroyed. Over 2,000 sailors were killed. It was a devastating blow to the United States Pacific Fleet. The following day, U.S. President Franklin D. Roosevelt delivered his famous Day of Infamy speech, and Congress declared war on Japan.
December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
The Allies' call for the U.S. to join the war had been answered. Number 7. The Hindenburg disaster. The first major disaster caught on camera. This airship accident transfixed and horrified audiences in the late 1930s. On May 6, 1937, the German airship LZ-129 Hindenburg was docking in New Jersey when it caught fire, resulting in 36 fatalities.
It burst into flames. Get it started. It's fighting and it's crashing terrible. Oh my, get out of the way, please.
Watching the airship crash to the ground, radio journalist Herb Morrison summed it up best with his iconic exclamation.
Oh, the humanity.
Despite the carnage, there were survivors, but they couldn't help establish the cause of the fire, which continues to be debated. Whatever the truth, the effect was the end of Zeppelins as a popular form of air travel. Number 6. Victory in Europe Day. After 6 bloody years of battle, the Second World War was finally over in Europe.
Today is Victory in Europe Day.
Berlin had fallen to the Soviet Union's Red Army, and Nazi leader Adolf Hitler had taken his own life. His successor, Admiral Karl Dönitz, authorized Germany's surrender. On May 8, 1945, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill announced victory over fascism, leading to parties on the street in celebration.
Victory Day changes to Victory Night, and the darkening skies over London are lit by the joyous lights of peace. At this great moment in their history, the people of Britain rejoice with their allies in the victory for which every one of them has worked so hard and so long.
Though the effects of the war were still being felt, the jubilation on that day is historic, and several countries still commemorate the date as a public holiday. Number 5, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Just 17 years after the Second World War ended, Cold War tensions between the US and Soviet Union almost triggered another one, this time nuclear. In response to the US deploying nuclear missiles in Italy and Turkey, the Soviet Union did the same in Cuba in 1962. Cuba was keen for Soviet help after the U.S. had backed a failed invasion the previous year.
That a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island.
Despite being advised to launch an airstrike and invasion, President John F. Kennedy opted for a more diplomatic approach, a naval quarantine preventing delivery of more missiles.
All ships of any kind bound for Cuba, from whatever nation or port, will, if found to contain cargoes of offensive weapons, be turned back.
After tense talks, Kennedy and Soviet First Secretary Nikita Khrushchev agreed to scale back their nuclear missiles. But for just over 1 month, the world stood on the brink of nuclear catastrophe. Number 4, the Apollo 11 moon landing. It really was one giant leap for mankind. Back in the 1960s, the idea of sending people to the moon still seemed like science fiction.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
But, spurred on by the space race between the US and Soviet Union, NASA's Apollo lunar module Eagle touched down on the moon's surface on July 20th, 1969.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon, and Buzz Aldrin the second. An estimated 650 million Earthlings tuned in to witness the event on TV. Despite all our divisions, in that moment, the world watched together in awe as we achieved something we never thought possible.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Number 3. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. While World War II ended in Europe on May 8, 1945, the Allies continued to fight against Japan. On August 6th, after the Japanese refused to surrender, the United States dropped an atomic bomb known as Little Boy on the Japanese city of Hiroshima.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
3 days later, they dropped a second, known as Fat Man, on Nagasaki. The bombs vaporized many in the blast radius and inflicted radiation burns and sickness on others, killing an estimated 129,000 to 226,000 people, mostly civilians. Japan surrendered on August 15th. Initially, the horrors of the attacks were little reported, but slowly, images and footage began to reveal the hellish consequences of atomic warfare.
It's important, I think, that we understand the misery and terror and death that it caused.
Number 2, 9/11. Just about everyone who's old enough to remember it can tell you where they were when they heard about the September 11th attacks in 2001.
And we saw the plane on the other side of the building, and there was smoke everywhere, and people were jumping out the windows.
For New York, it was morning when 2 hijacked passenger jets crashed into and ultimately demolished the Twin Towers as part of a coordinated attack. Another plane hit the Pentagon. After news of a 4th crash came to light that day, it became apparent that the passengers of United Airlines Flight 93 took back their flight and downed the weaponized aircraft before it reached Washington, D.C.
You could hear him yelling, "In the cockpit, the cockpit."
The event claimed close to 3,000 lives, and the world was forever changed.
The other trade center's down. It's down. It's down.
Before we continue, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell to get notified about our latest videos. You have the option to be notified for occasional videos or all of them. If you're on your phone, make sure you go into your settings and switch on notifications. Number 1, the COVID-19 pandemic. On March 12, 2020, the World Health Organization announced that the COVID-19 outbreak had become a pandemic.
We have therefore made the assessment
that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
At the time, few of us fully understood what it would mean for our lives in the years to come. Nonetheless, the news had people worldwide glued to their screens or running to stock up on groceries, especially toilet paper.
To ensure compliance with the government's instruction to stay at home, we will immediately close all shops selling non-essential goods.
Through lockdowns, the world watched as the virus continued to dominate headlines, and the death toll skyrocketed from the hundreds into the thousands and then millions. The WHO's announcement was the beginning of a long, rocky road for all of us.
Boosters are important, but the most important thing we need to do is get more people vaccinated.
Some moments just stop the world in its tracks. What's the one you'll never forget? Let us know in the comments below.